Hi, it's Greg Goernert, Vice President and Senior Investment Advisor at Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management and Goernert Wealth Management. Now here, welcome to the channel where we help you make sense out of your financial world. Now, I'm really excited about this. Anyone who knows me knows that this would be a topic that I'd be super excited about. But I'm going to be joined by Ken Herbert, Canaccord's analyst on aerospace and in particular on space. So welcome, Ken Herbert. Hi, Ken, how are you?
Hey, Greg, I'm very good. How are you?
Great. Well, thanks for joining me. Now Canaccord just finished up their second annual NewsSpace Investors Summit, and we've got a lot of news off of that. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that and your new monthly space telescope report.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Appreciate being with you here today. So, as you highlighted, space, and especially commercial space, has become investable, and I think we've seen a real increase in investor interest in the market. And there's really a couple of key fundamental themes driving this. First is costs are coming down. I mean, Elon Musk and SpaceX, through reusability of rockets, through a vertically integrated business model, has really laid the groundwork for a lower cost environment. And they're obviously getting a lot of work with the United States government, but they're really driving a new business model. And then as the technology continues to mature, we're seeing significant opportunities open up in areas like communications, Earth observation, and other tourism eventually. So we hosted our second NewsSpace Investor Summit just a few weeks ago. We had several of the what I call rising stars, private companies of the space economy, a couple, three in fact, Rocket Labs, Relativity Space, and Aerospace, focused on launch vehicles. Two of those companies, Rocket Lab and Astra, have agreed to go public here through a de-SPACing process. So some real interesting smaller companies, and another company, Voyager Holdings, which is like a space infrastructure play. I mean, it's hard to imagine now, but as we get more presence in space, and as the United States government leads the effort of trying to return to the moon and eventually to Mars, there's a lot of talk about manufacturing in space. I had a panel or a presentation discussion with Jim Bridenstine, former administrator of NASA here, who went through a lot of detail on what you can do in a microgravity climate around manufacturing, around healthcare research, around medical research. So as we get more of a presence in space, as costs come down, and as it becomes more of a commercial and consumer market, there's just a lot of exciting things happening and a lot of opportunity opening up.
Yeah. Now, how has the global pandemic affected the overall investment in the space sector?
So surprisingly, it hasn't been too much of an impact. We've certainly seen some delays just because of logistical issues around launch schedules, and that's been on the military side as well as on the commercial side, obviously. But remember, it was in the middle of the pandemic that obviously here in the United States we returned astronauts to the space station launched from U.S. soil, so that was very exciting and a real highlight. Last year, and it's obviously been last year that we've really seen a lot of the interest in these space startups and the SPACs and other new space economy companies, we call it, really take off. So I think it's also pointed to it's tapped into a lot of imagination and a lot of excitement around the next frontier, so to speak, as we think about accessing space. We didn't mention it earlier, but space tourism is, again, we've had delays, but that's a market, believe it or not, that's expected to open up fairly significantly in the next 5 to 10 years as people are able to pay privately to go have an experience in outer space.
Yeah, I think you look back 20 years ago when we were talking about it, when we saw Virgin Galactic and a number of the other companies that started out, and that seems to be starting to come to fruition, which I think is super exciting. Now, you in your monthly note you put out there was a paragraph headed "SPACs reach the final frontier." Can you talk a little bit more about investor centric and how companies are leveraging SPACs to get themselves public?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so we've seen several of them in the space sector, and there's a couple of ways to view this. Similar with a lot of SPACs, it tends to provide capital to earlier stage companies, and a number of these companies are even pre-revenue. So that's clearly consistent with the broader SPAC theme. I think as we've seen investor interest grow, there's been a real scarcity of assets or ways to play space markets. You've got a number of larger companies that are active predominantly in the military market, and then you've got companies like Maxar, for instance, MAXR, that have a bit of, certainly some commercial business, but very well grounded on the military side. But then you've got a number of these companies, as the SPAC frenzy has caught up with space, so to speak, where it provides capital for these companies sooner than probably they otherwise would have had access to through a normal way IPO process. It's taking advantage of the investor intimate and the sentiment today to put money to work on this sector. And certainly it's following in the footsteps of what was probably one of the early SPACs and has been very successful. You mentioned Virgin Galactic, targeted on space tourism. So there's also here in the United States, there's a national security angle. A number of these, it enables a lot of these companies that are doing both commercial and military work to access capital from U.S. investors and helps them perhaps maintain a competitive edge relative to other countries or other markets or other companies. So that's clearly an important factor as well.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So, catalysts that you see this year. So we've got the investments with the SPACs, government spending coming in. What are the catalysts for the sector do you see over the next 18 months?
So a couple of the most important are going to be one, as we think about commercial markets, it's really just successful launches of these satellites. So obviously, aside from SpaceX, there's really only one other company, Rocket Lab, that's successfully launched a number. They've had 19 successful launches, satellites or successful launches. So that's there's a steady cadence plan, except looking for an acceleration there. That's clearly going to be should be some positive catalysts. Second, the successful de-SPACing of a number of these companies. We've had a number of announcements certainly over the last 6 months as some of these companies do start to come public here and at the end of the second quarter and ideally into the third quarter. That should certainly be a positive catalyst. And then perhaps one of the most visible will be for Virgin Galactic. They plan to do a flight later this summer into the fall with Richard Branson, who's the the founder behind that. Once he has successfully had his space tourism voyage, then they expect to start to open that up again to sell seats on their aircraft. They had started several quarters ago. They halted that process, and they had some delays with the aircraft. But then getting that successful flight and then opening them up to the broader market should be a really interesting development that we're watching very closely.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Ken, why don't we wrap it up here? Very happy that you joined us to bring us up to speed with what's going on in that area. And I really wish you'd come and join us again. Thanks very much, Ken Herbert.
Thank you, Greg.